All right. Hello, everyone. All right. Hello, everyone. Oh, there we go. All right. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you've learned a couple very cool new things about some of the strangest facts. I hope everyone's Thursday is going well so far. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks, everyone, for giving us some of your valuable time today, and we want to make sure we use it well. So, we are here to talk about mastering BESS technical operations. Basically, we are going to talk about how you can tackle the 72% failure gap to protect your long-term ROI. All right, then, oops. So we want to cover today that essentially you might be building your pro forma, assuming your long-term degradation is your biggest enemy, but the data actually says otherwise. 72% of BESS failures occur within the first 24 months of operation. This is per Intertek CEA, formerly Clean Energy Associates. So today we're going to show you how early stage O&M and commissioning oversight are non-negotiable for protecting your long-term ROI across your BESS assets. So we're going to cover the rise of battery storage and its business implications, going beyond standard ESS inspection practices, managing BESS behaviors, and handling specific manufacturer and chemical nuances. So your speakers today are some of the best ones around: Adam Alvita of Omnidian and Trevor Williams of Solar Connect. Please, if you could both introduce yourselves and let us know what you know about BESS. Adam, why don't you go first?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining today. My name is Adam Alvita. I'm a senior product manager here at Omnidian. I've been with the organization for 4.5 years now. I've been in the solar industry since 2016. I'd say of the last 2.5 years, I've been hyper-focused on the commercial PV and BESS space. There's a lot of things happening in the BESS world right now. It's an exciting field to be in, and it emerges every day. And I think having these forums really helps to bring some of that fragmented knowledge around the industry into one centralized location, because everyone is learning how to do this at the same time. Excited to be here.
And Trevor, how about you?
Yeah, appreciate it, Bree. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, Trevor Williams, founder, president, Solar Connect. Been in the industry, renewable solar battery energy space since 2013. Come from a long generation of electricians. Even got a little sprinkle of HVAC technician training in there. So look forward to the growth of the battery industry as we intend for it to boom even more than it did the solar industry. I came from the EPC space before starting Solar Connect. So most of my experience is hands-on EPC building. As we now move into the O&M space, we are getting our hands and feet very dirty quickly with the battery storage world.
Okay, thank you both. So now that we have an introduction to who you are listening to, let's dive right in. And if it helps, I am the senior content manager here at Omnidian, and I will be hosting today. So let's get into the BESS Pulse Check. First things first, let's figure out where we're currently at in the industry. So the BESS business is booming. 81.25% of asset owners expect storage O&M to grow faster than solar O&M throughout the rest of this year. And this is per our State of Solar O&M 2026 report that we conducted with Solar Plaza earlier this year. Insurers are tightening requirements, demanding proof of regular maintenance protocols and robust thermal management before granting coverage. So projects with comprehensive maintenance agreements, for example, and 24/7 monitoring can often secure preferential pricing for insurance. Standard premiums range from 0.3% to 1.2% of a project's value. And this is as per the climate risk solution provider REPath. Adam, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a great stat to see the BESS O&M storage space growing. I'm constantly in market forecasts and projections, trying to understand where the space is going, and then how do we position Omnidian to build out new products and services to support how the industry is going to have these increased attachment rates. I'm not sure if you've all seen the recent OM Analytics data. They do a great comprehensive analysis on the C&I BESS space in particular, but roughly in 2025, we're looking at 300 megawatt hours installed capacity, and then in the next 5 years, we're expecting somewhere around 2,000 megawatt hours. Now we all know that forecasts move and they change, administrations change, policy changes, but I think the big overall picture and takeaway is that BESS attachment rate is going to grow at a very increasing amount. It's up and to the right. And what that means right now is we really need to take a look at the market, understand who are the main players in the OEM space, and start building out new products and services to support our clients who are installing these BESS assets. I think the BESS space is a bit of the wild, wild west right now, sort of where PV was 15, 20 years ago. There's a lot of fragmentation around standard best practices. I think something also we're seeing in the space is that with the increase in O&M requirements coming, we're looking at other ways to help empower our field service providers to make sure everyone has the right knowledge. What is the best practice? Something that we're seeing as well is that every OEM has their own way of doing things, which there's a little bit of gatekeeping on the sort of like AVL side of installation best practices. So we try to look at and understand what are the most basic commonalities around preventive maintenance and corrective practices for some of the most majority installed equipment out there in the BESS space, and then try to layer on the Omnidian advantage of pulling in our monitoring, diagnostics, and alerting capabilities to understand how do we actually not just look at the basics of OEM support for these large systems, but also add in a few additional field service expertise checks and balances to make sure that these are optimally serviced and can perform to the best of their abilities. But I'm really curious to hear what Trevor thinks from the actual tactical on in the ground field experience.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Great points. It's gonna be a very steep learning curve for a lot of us out there, and I think some of us are already experiencing it. A way to get in front of it for us is going to be the EPCs and the owner operators for them to take a very hands-on approach during the EPC handoff and also during those job books and making sure that we're handing over an asset rather than a punch list. So we got to make sure that the system is operating to its full capabilities from day one. That way we're not working with a degraded system or something that's limping along the way, for lack of better terms. I know a lot of the systems are going to be highly software driven, but a lot of these issues are going to be very physical. And they're going to start with some of the HVAC performance, environmental sealing, loose and stress terminations. And that's why I think focusing on those punch lists and job books on the front end during the EPC commissioning and handoff to the owner operator is going to be very critical during this time.
All right. We'll go ahead and move on to the next slide here. So sure, BESS is booming, but there's a big failure window. We had just talked about some of the potential issues there. As noted in the introduction, 72% of BESS failures occur within the first 24 months of operation, according to Intertech. This makes early stage O&M and commissioning oversight basically non-negotiable if you want to protect your long-term ROI. The first 2 years are the most critical, often involving failure incidents related to suboptimal installation, assembly, and commissioning. According to CEA and according to the Electric Power Research Institute, cell defects are actually rare. They're only responsible for about 11 to 15% of total failures. The remaining 89% involve balance of system components like HVAC, environmental seals, like Trevor mentioned, and integration quality. So these are areas often ignored by standard BMS dashboards. Adam, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think looking at that initial bathtub curve for issues within a site in the first 2 years is rather shocking. I think it kind of shows some of the immaturity we have in the market today, where we don't have the best or the most up-to-date standard practices for installation, but also the handoff to our clients at the end of the day. I think it's really important. Trevor mentioned this earlier, that there's going to be a lot of data and information coming from these systems. Getting alerts are great, but I think what is really important is like the downstream execution and what operations team you have on site. And that kind of starts at the pre-PTO during the commissioning phase to make sure it is being installed accurately to the manufacturer specifications. That's something that we've been focusing on at Omnidian, is looking at how do we build out more BESS specific QA QC programs. There's a lot of things that can go wrong within an installation. So to make sure that you get a second set of eyes on the system to hopefully catch as many of these imbalances or issues early on before it does go live and active on the grid. These are really expensive assets, and want to make sure that the people who are putting the money into these sites are able to get that return on investment from day one instead of catching issues from day one. So we're trying to get ahead of that from a QA QC perspective and building out products and services that can support that pre-PTO timeline. But it's always easier said than done. These systems are evolving. There are new manufacturers, so constantly trying to build custom specs and QA QC reports for each OEM manufacturer has been challenging, given some of the lack of standardization within the industry right now. But that's kind of what we're seeing from our side here.
Adam, I think you and I would both like to ask Trevor, as an EPC, Trevor, what issues have you personally experienced within this 2-year window, and how did you handle those?
Yeah, Adam mentioned it earlier. It's the fragmentation of the manufacturers and understanding how each system needs to be installed. And as we're ramping up the installation rate across the country, we mentioned it earlier, a very steep learning curve for these guys in the field to learn. So there's going to be failures, but again, during your cold and hot commissioning on the EPC side is when generally you should catch those. And then anything outside of that needs to be caught and resolved in a very timely fashion so it doesn't turn into something bigger down the road.
All right. So we've kind of set a little bit of the stage here, but let's talk really quickly about the cost of inaction. So for a 30% capacity loss by year 10, this can result in $4.2 million replacement costs for a 10 megawatt system. And these are just standard financial modeling figures used by asset managers across the industry currently, like what we use here at Omnidian. And this model illustrates the degradation cliff caused by poor thermal management practices. That's a pretty big cost of inaction. Adam or Trevor, do either of you want to share your experiences with this level of loss and replacement costs?
I can step in here. Quite frankly, have not experienced the losses at this magnitude yet, but I'm foreseeing them coming very soon. From my experiences, we did have a pretty big battery failure during cold commissioning, which ended up being some cell failures, and that was about 10% of our total project consumables, and including our battery costs. So it was a very big loss for our asset. And what that was again, some workmanship issues from not understanding the installation methods and understanding the racking of those batteries. So again, it comes back to the learning what the manufacturer requires and then applying that in the field for the folks that are installing those systems.
Yeah, similar to Trevor, we haven't seen losses at this scale. Hopefully we'll never see them at Omnidian, but it's always bound to happen. I think going back to Trevor, he said that, the installation practices are really important here. Everything's a bit different, and making sure you're doing it early and checking it with the OEM specs is great. I think there's a huge opportunity in the industry right now to work more closely with our BESS OEMs and really be part of that feedback loop. If something isn't working during commissioning and installation, how do we work with them to either change their practices and policies around what is best for these sites? We also know that sometimes equipment sits around on site before it's actually installed, and for the BESS systems, to make sure that they are constantly charged or don't go too low in their depth of discharge by just sitting and idling on site. So I want to make sure that as we are, buying more equipment, doing some safe harboring within the industry, and kind of keeping that to install at a later date, that those are taken into consideration while you're on site and waiting to be installed. So I think a lot of these can be caught early on, but I think having a good team who has the right knowledge is going to be key to success for these projects.
Great. Okay. All right. So there are a lot of uncertainties. There's a lot of, like Adam was talking about, there's not a lot of standardization across certain, OEMs and such right now, but let's try to talk about some certainties now today. Let's give you all something that you can walk away with to better manage your BESS moving forward. So we're going to start with how you can cover and go beyond standard BESS inspection practices at the beginning of a system's life cycle. So for starters, implement rigorous front-end QA/QC and commissioning oversight. Identifying suboptimal installation or assembly errors during commissioning phase and within those first 2 years of operation is critical for protecting your long-term ROI. Proactively catching issues in the balance of system components like HVAC and environmental seals can prevent the capacity degradation that leads to these millions in replacement costs. Adam, thoughts on QA/QC? I know you've been pretty into that here at Omnidian, trying to figure out how we can best set this kind of services up.
Yeah, I can let Trevor talk on the more technical side of the QA/QC, but I think looking at the project lifecycle overall is really important. Sometimes you look at tax equity investors, people are a bit hesitant to look at QA/QC services. They kind of see it as an additional add-on, additional cost. But as you've mentioned, the data is out there. There are issues that are happening mostly within the first 2 years, and a lot of that can be caught with a really diligent QA/QC process. So I think it's really having impactful conversations during the actual commissioning of the site, during the installation, and even looking at what is this project going to cost, making sure you're having budget for QA/QC. You might have the world's best installer, things happen. So having a second party to really validate that everything has been installed correctly, I think is a really great practice. But I think that kind of starts really far upstream in the value chain here as you're looking at project financials and making sure you're actually budgeting it in. Sometimes we've seen this on the PV side where the PM costs and O&M costs for PV, the budget either gets slashed or a bit overlooked. And as we look at these, sometimes multi-million-dollar assets, spending a couple extra $1,000s upfront can really bring more longevity to the system itself. So I think making sure you are talking about this in the budgeting process, making it not just an add-on, but more of another check within your site plans to make sure that this has been done, it's been verified by multiple parties, and this is good to go.
Yeah, and then Trevor, what about the technical side?
Yeah, speaking from my past, a lot of the owners and operators have now brought in some of their own QA/QC folks. The EPCs have always done it, but they have also added on as well. It's become a big focus on the solar side, and it's even bigger now on the battery storage side for some of them as these assets are becoming more valuable in a smaller condensed area and footprint. So, I wrote down a couple of things because from my past, there was one specific job that comes to mind, and we ended up bringing the skid integrator and the battery manufacturer to site to help us build that first system. When they did that, we implemented our standard operating procedures within our own company, and then rolled them out with them buying off on that. And then the last step was building that and getting sign off from the owner operator so that when we built the next 26 containers, they would be identical to that first one. It was very critical for us because then we understood how to build it the way that the client wanted it and also the way the manufacturer wanted it. And at the end, it was a final piece that fit their puzzle. As we are now, going through more and more of the systems, there's going to be people that make mistakes, as Adam mentioned, but also something comes to mind, and something you see on the slide is pencils and paper. People like to pencil whip some of these documents. So on the back end, post QA/QC, there needs to be some inspection internally to understand that the handover from EPC to owner operator to asset manager is all in line.
All right, so before we actually move on, there's a question I wanted to bring up here from the audience. So HVAC is one of the things to check, right? Is this the HVAC that locally cools the battery system itself, or the HVAC that's conditioning the overall building space that happens to have the battery and other occupant spaces?
I'll take it. It can be a combination of both, depending on the design of the system. I've seen self-contained systems, containers where there's an HVAC system for each container, and then some where that container is also inside of a building. Then I've also seen racks inside of a building with no self-contained systems, but they kind of break it up so that there's no thermal event runway, and then also for your fire suppression as well. So they try to isolate it so that if there is an event, it doesn't destroy the entire system, and they can try to compartmentalize it within the system.
Okay, great. All right, so we talked about QA/QC and commissioning oversight. Now let's talk about benchmarking your performance. Do it immediately. Perform a post-commissioning performance benchmark. Do a full site round-trip efficiency test within the first 90 days. This should be used as your year zero baseline to measure the 3 to 30% capacity loss that can occur over time. Adam or Trevor, why is this so important for performance and ROI tracking? What can go wrong if you don't set up like a year zero baseline?
Yeah, I can jump in there a little bit. I think really having baseline metrics is sort of like your starting position with any good site evaluation. You need to know where your top line capacity is, where you are from day zero, and then as you look at tracking warranty obligations, what you're doing, all of your maintenance logs, you can kind of bring that back towards your year zero baseline. You can retest, you can calibrate, but you need to have a starting place to begin this analysis. If something happens, if it's an OEM defect or something within the warranty management claim you need to make, you can go back and refer to this number early on. But I think also having really diligent maintenance logs. We see a lot of our field service technicians in the way we set up at Omnidian. We have really diligent reporting, photo requirements, and then a long sort of like write-up of like what they did, why they did it, and then the timing of the check-in, the check-out. We're really trying to cross all of our T's and dot our I's to make sure that we're doing everything possible from a maintenance perspective that fits within these manufacturer warranties. And Trevor said this earlier, they're all a bit different in what they need, how to track it, what they require to actually submit something for warranty management. So starting with a baseline 0 value of your site is really a sort of a critical juncture point to do the rest of your long-term monitoring and maintenance, and how is your ROI going to build based off of that.
Great. Trevor, do you want to add anything from your perspective as an EPC?
Yeah, well, something just came to mind. If there's no history, there's no comparison. So if you have no baseline and can understand what it was doing, you're going to have a hard time going back to those manufacturers. And something that I can relate to in the solar industry and modeling and understanding behaviors of systems is, again, there at some point there was an expectation that was set with someone. Year 0 baseline has to also meet that expectation. So I think that's very critical. And then year 1 obviously comes with its degradations, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, year 0 is almost your most important.
We actually have a related question here from the audience again. I think we should bring this up quickly. For a typical battery system installation, how many different vendors and service providers are there at play from start to finish of system install? So how does this, affect QA, QC? And are these all different, or are there integrators doing more than one thing? And again, to the performance, who owns the performance? How does that all complicate benchmarking your performance?
Yeah, those are some great questions. So from my past, there are a lot of vendors and suppliers that get involved. Most of that's going to be handled with submittals, as it's wire, termination lugs, et cetera. The batteries themselves, they do work with a few integrators, and what we've done in the past is you'll integrate, say your battery with your transformer comes out on a skid in a container with the HVAC system, fire suppression, and all of that included. It's up to, and from very little O&M experience in the big realm of the picture here, is the monitoring platform and whoever is isolating and identifying those issues needs to work with each individual supplier or vendor. And if that's degrading the battery in such a way that those issues need to be addressed first before you can try to have a bigger conversation with the manufacturer. So it does get very complicated. You have to keep, the train on the tracks, for lack of better terms.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, we're seeing a lot of new equipment coming into the BESS O&M space as well. So we have new participants coming in, different softwares, different BMS, different PCS, different inverters. If you have PV on site as well, it adds complications. And I think as you're going through your initial startup phase, this kind of comes into your design and development of we're going to make sure that you are getting the right technology, but you can centralize it in such a way that you can get this full software stack in harmony. Because if you're getting alerts from multiple different systems, it's really difficult to manage. So trying to have it under one house in one centralized location to look at what are the most pertinent alerts and what is the actual information coming from the system in one centralized view. Trying to reduce as much context switching as possible is going to be a key to success, especially as you look downstream and thinking about the long-term, 20 years or 25 years of these sites, who's actually going to be operating them, and how do you make their lives as easy as possible to be effective as possible with the information in front of them. So that's a big part of the value chain here.
So it's clearly complicated, but who owns the performance then still?
I think it's also changing a lot within the industry of who owns performance. Sometimes the client is responsible for the performance at the BESS. Sometimes there are long-term service agreements that clients will have with the OEM providers. And then you have partners like Omnidian who are now bringing in our own sort of performance guarantees or availability guarantees to support these assets. So there are multiple ways to guarantee performance within the life cycle of these assets. It kind of depends on what equipment you're buying. And then, what is your intended use case also for these sites? Are you using it for just backup generation? Are you going to be, doing more like day trading within the energy you have on the site? Energy arbitrage. So I think also depending on what is your main use case for the BESS also can help you determine your O&M provider and performance strategy.
Okay, great. All right, so let's move beyond the basics to advanced management techniques and how they can help your pro forma assumptions possibly look a little bit more realistic. All right, your first item on your checklist is to deploy predictive off-gas detection. So integrate sensors that look for chemical markers or thermal anomalies 48 to 96 hours before a potential runaway. This provides a critical window for safe shutdown that standard threshold alarms can't offer. Adam, I think you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I can start with this one. So we haven't done any sort of additional sensor additions to sites. Sometimes they're just integrated within the BESS themselves. I think what's really important here is as you look at these early indicators, one, that you are having this set up within your alert platform of having the right triage plan to go ahead and when you get an alert in, it's great. You're aware of something is happening. There might be some temperature imbalances within a cell, or they're starting to off gas, which could lead to potential thermal runaway, which is always everyone's like worst case scenario. What do you do then? Like, what is your emergency response plan? So if and when that alert does come through, I think really the back end operations and sort of decision tree process is the next critical step of who you're going to call. And, with BESS, it's a 24/7 asset, unlike PV. So what happens at 3 a.m., who is picking up the phone? Who are you calling to actually get someone on site if required? So I think getting the alert is great. Being proactive from that perspective is should be on everyone's to-do list, but the downstream execution of when that alert comes in, how do you then operationalize and make sure people are in the right places to be successful is important. I don't know, Trevor, what do you think from your side?
Sorry about that. Yeah, we're gonna for us, we're gonna have to open up and expand our hours of operation based off what you said there, Adam. So it is a 24/7 asset, 365 24/7 asset as it is charging and discharging throughout the night. Yeah, and what you do downstream and how you react and how quickly you react and how what you do to correct that reaction as well based off the issue that you find. So um, I think the proactive and being reactive to those situations is both good. So you just got to take action when it does come up.
All right. Next up, we have infrared thermography. We're at the point where visual inspections aren't enough. So you need to conduct infrared thermography on high current connections. So moving beyond visual checks, using this imaging can help you identify excessive resistance at terminals and bus bars, which can cause localized heat generation and lead to some failures. So I believe, Trevor, you had mentioned that you had some thoughts on thermography. Have you had experiences with this yourself?
Absolutely, good and bad. Because you're gonna find those failures really quick with thermal imaging, and if they are that loose, you're gonna have some thermal events on site. So from experience, not only when you're doing this and following through with this process, what you see and how you correct those issues is very important. If you see something that is hot or you see a heat spike at a connection, it needs to be addressed. The torque needs to be checked. Something needs to be verified and why it's doing that. I think a good thing too is that just taking that image is good in itself. But the value, and like I said earlier, and sorry to repeat myself, is that corrective action. I just want to drive that home. When you see an issue, you got to make the corrective action.
Adam, did you want to add anything?
Nope, nothing else to add there. That was great.
All right, then we'll move right along. Final advanced management checklist item for this section is to verify everything around your HVAC. So verify HVAC flow rates in particular and liquid coolant levels. Advanced risk management includes preventing slow degradation before a BMS alarm threshold actually triggers. So you need to ensure your technicians measure the airflow and coolant flow rates and the filters and everything, rather than just checking if an HVAC unit is quote unquote on. So there's an interesting crossover happening in right now between the BESS world and the HVAC worlds, because both areas now need to work on these systems. In the future, we'll likely see more cross-training between HVAC and BESS technicians as the industry matures. Trevor, do you have experience here as an EPC working with HVAC technicians on installs and post-install?
To date, no, because all of our systems were integrated. We had a commissioning team that would come out and assist with the HVAC piece of it. That was a local company. Now, the installation piece, like I said, those were integrated. I do foresee this becoming a big driver in the future, especially as we're building battery storage in buildings. They're going to be larger, and they're going to have larger cooling systems. So those are going to have to be more trained experts that are going to be installing those systems. Me and Adam were talking earlier. I've got a friend of mine. He's actually in Guam. He's an HVAC guy. I worked for his dad's company during my college time. And we were talking the other day, and he was telling me that they're actually sending him to do some battery storage training for their HVAC side of it. So I'm going to be picking his brain over the next couple of weeks after he gets done with that training.
Great. Did you want to add anything directly to the conversation about HVAC flow rates and coolant levels in particular?
Maybe a HVAC in a more broad sense. This is a huge critical component to success of these battery sites. It's not just a fan on site. Keeping the temperature within an ambient range or acceptable range within the BESS itself can be a huge headache if not properly maintained. And I think something else that you need to consider is that, where is your BESS being deployed? The great thing about this technology is that it can essentially be installed anywhere. So I live in California. You see a lot of these being installed in more agriculturally dense areas. So in the summer, it gets really hot, but also you get a lot of extra dust and soil particulate in the air just because of where they are being installed. If you look at the manufacturer warranties and preventive maintenance requirements, they typically say, oh, you need to do one annual checkup, look at the filters once a year. But based on where you're actually installing these systems, you might need to check your filters more frequently because that could increase and put more stress on the HVAC system itself. So as you're going through and thinking about how do I perform best O&M to the best of my ability for this site, what is your geographical location? What is around you? Because you might need to increase your O&M visits based on just other geographic factors that might not be specifically in the manual. You might need to add additional buffer into your budget to send out maybe more of a semi-annual visit to go check filters for your HVAC units in particular.
Okay, great. Let's move on. I want to make sure that we get through all the slides. Last section that we were going to cover was anything related to OEM, manufacturer, and chemical nuances. So different batteries mean different operational needs. No two battery brands are built or operated exactly the same, right? And as Adam noted earlier, there's more and more players that keep coming in. So one of the first things that we all need to look out for is that you should map your technical operational data to warranty envelopes. Adam, can you explain this a bit, and why does this matter in helping affect long-term ROI?
Yeah, I think we've hit this point a few times, and it's going to hit it over the head again, that every OEM is a bit different in what they require for warranty management. I think it kind of really starts on like day one with your operations team of like what happens when you actually send someone to site. How is that documented, time-stamped, and photos taken of what is being done to make sure you encapsulate any sort of questions or issues that might happen further downstream. Those are kept in advance of a really high degree of specificity on your maintenance logs of who was there and why they touched it. But also going back to OEM certifications. Depending on the manufacturer, different FSPs need different certifications based on that OEM in particular, which just adds more complexity to the O&M space for BESS right now. It could be as easy as watching a few videos on an OEM's website, or you might actually need to be in person for a training as you see someone with like sun grow practices. Is all a bit different right now, and there's a bit of lack of standardization. So as we think about the workforce required, making sure that whoever is going to your site, they are specifically certified to touch that equipment, because that could void the warranty based on the OEM's policies. So I think starting there as well is a big key importance to make sure that your team on site is specifically aware of the nuances that might come with that OEM specifically.
And Trevor, you had mentioned when we were connecting about this earlier that you, from a field side, that you want the monitoring platform and the service team working from the same reality, kind of speaking to this automated alerts here when things are approaching these limits. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's more of being proactive instead of reactive as they already hit those limits. And to Adam's point, every environment's going to be slightly different, and as the dust or the pollen or the sand and the silt tends to build up, you're going to see temperatures start to rise within that unit. If you can go be a little more proactive on the front end and roll the truck prior to the alert being actually triggered, it could help you in the long term from a degradation rate as well. So and something else that I've been thinking about as we've had this conversation is you got to, and I'm drawing a little blank on the term right now, but from the EPC world, we would just build it and walk away, right? But there comes a responsibility where you have to balance the system out as some of those batteries tend to degrade. So they have to be balanced out and relocated throughout their units. So that's going to be some ongoing cost as well. That's going to tie into your warranty envelope.
Actually, speaking to that, let's move to the next slide here. You also need to tailor your maintenance to chemistry risk. So Trevor, you had just mentioned like you're going to have to start balancing these different types of batteries as they affect warranty, but you also have to just pay attention straight up to the different types of chemistry risks, right? Can you elaborate on this in particular?
Yeah, I wish I could go into a lot of detail here, but specifically, and most of our experiences are coming from the LFP world. And now as we move into some of these iron phosphates and other technologies, you almost need a chemist on your team to understand, are we designing a system that's going to discharge as we're designing it so that it behaves and degrades as the system was built and manufactured by the team? So real world conditions and standard test conditions do tend to vary a lot. So things are going to operate slightly different. I think that's going to come into play here with these different chemistries and how they react essentially. So I look forward to it. I've got a lot to learn on the chemistry side of the world. So got to get my glasses and my study book open.
Adam, did you want to add anything, or should we bump to the next one?
Yeah, just a quick note there is that everything has predominantly been LFP up to this point with the high energy density. That's just been the main player right now. But as Trevor mentioned, there are different chemistries coming out in the market that have yet to be at wide scale. So I think we're running into the same sort of issues we're experiencing today on the LFP side of like, is everyone certified to touch these new chemistries? What changes when you actually go onto these sites? So a lot to learn across the industry. I think that's what makes this exciting, is that there's always something new to learn every couple months.
Every couple of months is a lot, but you are right. All right, last one for this section. Hold suppliers accountable to their long-term service agreements. 73% of sites currently use LTAs, but there's an accountability problem. It's a significant weakness, according to our State of Solar O&M 2026 report with Solar Plaza. Trevor, do you want to speak to this? How can we potentially solve this problem? Oh, Trevor, you're on mute.
Yeah, it was telling me that I was on mute too. I sincerely apologize. Let me rewind a little bit. Yeah, so long-term service agreements are great, but back to what we talked about earlier, some of our year zero baseline information has got to be tracked and understood so that we can have some of those hard conversations with any of these OEMs if things start to degrade or fell at a rate that we were unexpecting. And I think another point is the service provider's reporting has to be very thorough and clear and detailed so that the person reading that report on the other side of the lens understands it to a T. It's going to be a very challenging market though, because Adam has driven this conversation several times now. Is all the manufacturers are slightly different. You've got your Teslas, your Fluences, you've got your standalone batteries that are being integrated. So it's going to be a lot of envelopes and a lot of documentation that we have to keep up with as collectively as a group here.
Adam, any additional thoughts?
Nothing else from my side.
Okay. So those were the three big sections that we wanted to get through today. We do have some bonus tips, but we are running out of time. So what we'll do is this webinar is being recorded. Everyone attending here can get the recording. And if you'd like, we can also send you the slides. But we have some bonus tips that we will share with you after the webinar because we're getting a little low on time. We'll move right on to kind of the end here. We all know now what's at stake. The 72% of failures occur, 30% capacity loss, 4.2 potential million replacement costs, and we covered what you can do about it. We're going to move on to some of these questions in the chat because they are very good questions. So let's start with this one. How does a provider like Omnidian serving battery systems inside or adjacent to a building coordinate with on-site facility staff? Safety access protocols, for example, is the building side coordination a key challenge for timely and effective O&M and remediation?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think going back to the operational effectiveness and what is your game plan downstream is a huge part of the value chain that Omnidian brings. We have individual portfolio operations managers at Omnidian who have these strategic accounts. We do work with some of the large big box stores where there are more sophisticated players and policies that they've intentionally put in place for their own practices and safety for those stores. So understanding who is the facilities manager, how do we get access to the site, and then also potentially integrating with their CMS system has been a way to make sure we can all be on the same page when an alert does happen. We need to send a technician to the site faster than normal. That we can get into their system, into their queue right away. It never hurts to just pick up a phone as well and call that individual. But having that person-to-person relationship is really a key driver towards our success here, because automation is great, but making sure that you have the right people connected on the same page. And I think that's a big part of our onboarding process as well, is that when something does happen, we walk our clients through their expectations as well. Just so that they aren't holding us up from being successful at remediating the issue as quickly as possible.
Right. Trevor, do you have anything to add, or can I throw you a different question?
No, I would like to add here, because I think what Omnidian has done very well is the communication piece with some of these big box stores, and there's a lot of communication involved with scheduling and understanding access. So to date, accessing some of those systems has not been a challenge for us. So it is fun and interesting as things grow and as these assets become located inside, outside the building. It's going to be fun and challenging at the same time to service them. So look forward to it.
Let's actually piggyback right off of that discussion about access to battery data. How are O&M providers using this battery data to move from reactive to proactive maintenance? What hurdles are providers like this seeing in getting access to battery data from asset owners? Trevor, maybe you've got some experience with that.
Yeah, and most times it's not forthcoming information, so we have to attain that data as we talk to the manufacturer and understand what's going on. Sorry, I'm reading that question again. Yeah, and I think that is one of the biggest hurdles is making that data readily available to the guys in the field and the service providers. Because most times you'll see an alert, you'll send a work order, and then the work order will come with some information. But I think it's understanding like at a greater detail, like what was driving that alert. And sometimes you may see it. So from like a temperature perspective, you may see the increase or the decrease. So depending on what that failure is.
Any thoughts, Adam, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think Trevor nailed it. It's a huge key to success is making sure the technicians on site have access to the systems. So as they're making these changes and adjustments, they can actually see, did that actually remediate the issue? Going back to Omnidian's value proposition, like there's always someone to call at the end to say, hey, this is working, this is not working. So you have like a real-time connection to the data that we're seeing. But I do think empowering technicians is the way to go, making sure they get access to the site in the field. And we're talking to other OEMs and data platforms to say, how can we give specific technician logins so that when they're on site, we don't have to play middleman in this scenario. They can have all the access and information they need to be successful.
Okay, excellent. All right, how about this question now? Is there any difference in failures from AC versus DC integration? Who wants to take that?
Big differences, I would say, depending on the specific failure, especially on the DC side. You could have some thermal runways. On the AC side, you're going to have some switchgear, breakers, protective relays, things that are going to protect things up and downstream. But most times, if you're going to see a failure, it's lack of terminating properly. A connector is not sealed properly. A battery is not on the rack all the way. A clogged filter. So I think just looking at the failure itself and just kind of really focusing on it, but will be differences between those two.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So let's go to this next one here from Eric. He asked, do BESS service level agreements typically include uptime guarantees, or what is the toughest metric customers typically ask for? Adam, you might know about some of this based on what our customers have asked us, right?
Yeah, we're really trying to mirror some of our PV offerings in the BESS space as well. It's something new that the product team has been working on. So we're looking at BESS availability guarantees right now. So if you don't have an LTSA agreement with your OEM provider, Omnidian has other guarantee opportunities for your BESS asset. So we're looking at being able to guarantee a certain percentage, whether it's 97 or 98%, that your system will be able to charge or discharge simultaneously at any given point in time. I think once again, it goes back to what is your actual use case of your BESS? And then I think we try to guide our clients into what protection package makes the most sense based on how they're going to use and operate their energy assets.
Trevor, anything you would want to add there in terms of like uptime guarantees or a tough metric to look for?
I think the tough metric is going to be the location of the asset and where your service provider is located and their timely fashion to react to that service ticket. So having properly located service providers is going to be it's going to be a challenge, just like we see on the solar side. So it'll be fun and doable.
All right, let's fit in one more and let's do a quick rapid answer to this. Is there a way currently we connect commissioning records findings to ongoing BESS operations to correlate failures back to commissioning?
That's a great question. nothing that we have in the works right now that I'm aware of to connect those two pieces, but I think it's a great opportunity to explore in the future.
Trevor, are you seeing anything in the market related to that?
No, I was thinking about how I could vibe code something to tie into your Procore because, no.
All right, let's do super fast one more time here. As you compare AC and DC coupled systems, do you use a common fault taxonomy to separate true battery faults from integration, protection, controls, and workmanship issues? And where do you see the biggest concentration of faults in the first 24 months?
From what I'm hearing, it's heating and cooling, and most of it's cooling. So if you have an AC failure, you're going to have rapid increase in temperatures in your unit with rapid failures. So that's what I'm hearing and seeing.
Adam?
Yeah, less experience on that one, but I'd say having more like one aggregated platform is the way to go. Every OEM has their different APIs. If you're getting information via the cloud, which a lot of players do, it really as you're really kind of like dependent on what the OEM's API has and what frequency and consistency the data is. So as you're trying to make your own alerts and inferences, it might be good to have your own individual like data logger on site to get more accurate and more higher frequency data from the site and not just rely on the OEM itself. So there's a lot of different ways to get more granular data to support how my asset is actually performing.
Okay, excellent. We're going to wrap up there. Thank you everyone who attended and submitted very great thought-provoking questions. Let's give you back a couple minutes of your time. If you still have questions or we didn't answer them, Adam and Trevor said they are both willing to take your questions through email. You can see those right up on the screen. We'll also send you the recording link after this as well. Thank you all so much for your valuable time today, and we hope to see you again on a future webinar. Now go make it a great day. Adam, Trevor, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Bree. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Bree. Thank you, Adam. Everyone have a great day.
Yep.